I'm a 34-year-old man, married to my wife Emma, who's 32. We've been together for 7 years and have 2 young kids. Life was good, stable, and for the most part, happy. That was until my family decided they had the right to weigh in on my marriage. I come from a large family, and when I say large, I mean huge. Parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, they're all involved in each other's business in ways that most people would find exhausting. To them, there are no boundaries. Growing up, I was used to it. Every decision, big or small, was open for discussion, whether it was about school, jobs, or even relationships. I never saw it as an issue because that's just how things were. Emma, however, saw it differently. From the start, she kept her distance. She was always polite but never fully engaged the way my family expected. She didn't overshare, didn't ask for opinions, and certainly didn't let them dictate our life together. That didn't sit well with them. I could tell. They were always pushing, always trying to involve themselves more than necessary, and always acting like Emma was the problem for not wanting them in every corner of our marriage. I tried to balance it, but it was impossible to keep both sides happy. The whole situation exploded over something completely minor. We were at a family gathering, one of those big get-togethers where everyone is talking over each other, and kids are running around while the adults drink and gossip. At one point, Emma and I had a small disagreement about who would take our youngest to bed. I don't even remember the details anymore. It was nothing serious, not even a real argument, just one of those quick, tired exchanges parents have when juggling 2 kids in a busy environment. But my mother and sisters were watching. Later that night, my mom pulled me aside. She had that concerned tone, the kind she uses when she's about to say something she knows she shouldn't, but can't help herself. She asked if I was happy, if Emma was treating me well, if I felt smothered. I laughed it off, told her it was nothing, that we were fine, but she didn't seem convinced. I thought that was the end of it. But then my sister texted me the next day. She said she and some of the aunts had been talking about how distant I seemed lately, how Emma might not be the right match for me. Apparently, a whole conversation had taken place behind my back about my marriage, my stress levels, whether I was happy or just going through the motions. I was pissed. I told my sister to drop it and stop overanalyzing things. Again, I thought that would be the end of it. I had no idea just how deep this was about to go. A few days later, Emma pointed out that some family members were acting strange around her, overly polite, but distant, like they were trying to be nice while holding something back. She could feel it. I could feel it too. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe they were just overreacting to whatever assumptions they had made. But then I got a text from my cousin, a weird one. "Hey man, you doing okay?" I asked what he meant, and he hesitated before saying, "You should check the family chat." That's when I saw it. A full-blown discussion about my marriage, spanning dozens of messages, arguments, debates, speculation. People who barely spoke to Emma had a whole lot to say about her. And then, the cherry on top, a poll. A literal poll where my family had voted on whether I should divorce my wife. 65% said yes. I felt sick. This wasn't just a few nosy relatives overstepping, this was my entire extended family dissecting my relationship like it was some kind of public referendum, and to make it even worse, someone, most likely my younger cousin, based on the way he talks online, had posted the poll results in a private Facebook group, a family gossip group that of course got leaked. I could barely process it. This was insane. Who does this? Who decides that a couple's marriage is up for a vote? Emma saw it before I could stop her. She was furious, hurt, betrayed. She turned to me and told me one thing: "You need to handle this." And she was right. I had to do something. But what the hell do you even say to your own family after something like this? How do you even start? I decided to tackle this head on. There was no way I was letting this slide. I told my parents and siblings that we needed to talk in person as soon as possible. No dodging, no excuses. I wasn't about to have this conversation over text, and I needed to see their reactions firsthand. We met at my parents' house the next evening. My mom, dad, sister, and younger brother were there. My aunts and uncles weren't invited, though I was sure they were already waiting to hear how this meeting played out. I barely got through the door before my mom started acting emotional. She went straight into damage control mode. She teared up immediately, saying they never meant to hurt me. The poll wasn't serious. They were just concerned. They just wanted to check in. I shut that down fast. There was no checking in involved in creating a literal vote about whether I should get a divorce. That wasn't concern. It was crossing a massive line. My dad, who usually stayed quiet during family drama, finally spoke up. He admitted the poll was a bit much. But then, just as I thought he was actually on my side, he threw in, "You have to understand. We were just looking out for you." That's when I snapped. I laid it all out. They had no right to interfere in my marriage. No right to discuss Emma behind her back. No right to post that ridiculous poll, and definitely no right to spread it online like gossip. They completely humiliated me and my wife. My sister jumped in next. She claimed they only did it because they noticed I seemed stressed lately. According to her, they just wanted to make sure I was happy. I wasn't buying it. If they were genuinely concerned, they could have spoken to me privately. Instead, they turned my marriage into a group discussion for the whole family. My mom wiped her tears dramatically and said they were just trying to open my eyes to things I might not see. Gaslighting at its finest. She tried to act like this was all out of love, like they were doing me a favor. Then my aunt's name got brought up. Apparently, she had been one of the biggest voices in the group chat, pushing the idea that Emma was too controlling. That was their justification. My wife apparently didn't let me be myself, so they needed to step in. At this point, I demanded to know who actually created the poll. I wanted to hear it from them. After a long, awkward silence, my 21-year-old cousin admitted it was him. He thought it was just a joke. A joke? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked if Emma was even considered in this joke. Did they think about how this would make her feel? Did they think about the damage they were doing? Of course, no one had an answer. Then came the next issue. Emma wasn't there. They asked why she didn't come. I made it clear. She didn't feel safe around them. She had no reason to sit through a meeting with people who thought her marriage was a family-wide decision. That's when my mom scoffed. Emma should be apologizing to us. That was it. I had nothing left to say. I told them that if they wanted to remain in my life, they needed to apologize to Emma, publicly, just like they had publicly embarrassed her. No half apologies, no excuses, just real accountability. That didn't go over well. My mom outright refused. My sister looked away. My cousin muttered something about how he didn't think it was that serious. My dad just sighed. I walked out. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up. Half the family was texting, some apologizing, some doubling down. The same cousin who posted the poll in the first place messaged me, saying I didn't think it would get this big. No responsibility. No acknowledgement of what he did. Emma wasn't surprised when I told her. She had seen this coming from a mile away. She told me straight up, if they couldn't own up to this, she was done with them. No contact, no visits, nothing. And now I had a decision to make. Do I cut them off completely, or do I give them one last chance to make this right? The fallout from the confrontation was worse than I expected. The moment I walked out of my parents' house, it was like I had declared war. By the next morning, my phone was flooded with notifications. At first, I thought it was just more texts from relatives trying to justify themselves. But when I opened Facebook, I realized the situation had escalated beyond control. My younger cousin, the same one who originally posted the poll, had doubled down. He made a public post in a private family group, claiming I was brainwashed by Emma and that I had turned against my own blood. He made it seem like I was under her control, and that my decision to call out my family was proof that she was manipulating me. It didn't stop there. My aunts and uncles jumped in, commenting under his post, saying they had always had concerns about Emma but had tried to be supportive. They called this whole situation proof that she had isolated me from my family, as if I wasn't a grown man capable of making my own decisions. Then came the cheap shots at Emma's family. One of my aunts claimed that Emma's side of the family was cold and never respected traditions. She said that was why Emma had never fully connected with my relatives, because she came from a background where family wasn't valued. It was disgusting. These people barely knew Emma's parents, yet suddenly, they were acting like they had her entire lineage figured out. I didn't have time to process any of it before friends started reaching out. People outside of my family, mutual friends, coworkers, started texting me, asking if I was okay. The Facebook post had gotten traction, and even people who weren't part of my extended family were seeing the drama unfold. That's when Emma hit her breaking point. She had been holding it together, ignoring the texts and the passive-aggressive social media posts. But now, seeing people drag her family into this, she was done. She told me she wasn't dealing with this anymore. If I wasn't going to take a stand once and for all, she would go low contact herself. That was my wake-up call. I had spent too long trying to keep the peace, trying to find some way to make both sides happy. But this was beyond fixing, so I made my own post. I didn't go into details or air dirty laundry. I didn't engage in name-calling or clapbacks. I just made one thing clear. I was sick of the harassment. I was sick of my marriage being treated like a public debate. And from that moment forward, I was setting boundaries. The backlash was instant. Within minutes, my mom sent me a furious text, saying I had embarrassed her by airing private family matters online. According to her, I was the problem now. I was the one causing drama by refusing to just forgive and move on. My siblings also split down the middle. My younger brother 26M privately texted me, saying the family went too far and that I was right to stand up for myself. But my older sister 38F took my mom's side. She claimed the poll was just concern, and that I was overreacting. She even hinted that Emma was the reason I was so angry lately. Then something unexpected happened. A few cousins reached out, apologizing. They admitted that they regretted participating in the poll, but had felt pressured to go along with it. Some of them said they never thought it would get this big. I didn't know whether to believe them or not, but it was clear that even within the family, people were starting to realize how messed up this was. My mom made one last attempt to justify everything. She sent me a long email saying she did what any loving mother would do. She insisted that her only goal was to make sure I was truly happy, and that I was mistaking concern for control. I didn't even respond. I was done with the excuses. Emma had already made up her mind. She was completely done with my family, unless they showed real accountability. No more fake apologies. No more "we were just looking out for you" nonsense. If they couldn't own up to what they did, they weren't a part of our lives. I called my mom one last time. I made it very clear. If she ever pulled something like this again, she wouldn't be a part of my life anymore. I told her I was choosing my marriage. Her response? She called it a threat. She accused me of being heartless for choosing my wife over the people who raised me. She acted like I was abandoning her when in reality she had been pushing me away this entire time. Now I have a choice to make. Do I cut contact completely, or do I give them one last chance to make this right? After my last conversation with my mother, the silence began. No calls, no texts, nothing. For a family that usually had their hands in everyone's business, it was strange, almost eerie. At first, I thought maybe they had finally gotten the message. Maybe the drama had died down. But after a few days I started second-guessing. Had I been too harsh? Was cutting them off really necessary? I knew what they had done was out of line, but the complete silence made me feel like I had burned the bridge completely. Emma, on the other hand, wasn't moved by any of it. She told me I could make my own decision about staying in contact, but she was done. No more visits, no more family events, no more pretending everything was fine. If they couldn't take accountability, they weren't part of her life anymore. Then something unexpected happened. My younger brother, 26M, reached out. He was the only one in the family who hadn't publicly taken a side. When he called, he didn't waste time sugarcoating it. He said the entire situation was ridiculous, and that he thought the family was being insane for making my marriage their business. He even admitted that some of the cousins felt pressured into going along with the poll because they didn't want to be the odd ones out. It was the first real support I had gotten from anyone in the family. But right when I thought maybe, just maybe, things were settling down, my older sister, 38F, decided to escalate things even further. She made a long Facebook post about losing family to manipulative spouses. It was clearly about me, vague enough not to name names, but obvious enough that everyone in the family knew what she was talking about. She painted herself as the victim, saying how sad it was to watch a loved one be controlled and cut off from their real family. And just like that, the floodgates reopened. I got a private message from my aunt, the same one who had helped stir the pot in the first place. She wasn't angry, she was guilt-tripping me. She told me that family is family, and that I should just forgive and forget because at the end of the day, they just wanted what was best for me. I ignored it. I wasn't playing into the cycle again. Then my dad called. He sounded serious, which was rare. He told me that my mom wasn't eating, that she was deeply stressed over everything, and that maybe I should reach out. I knew exactly what this was. Emotional manipulation. Not even an hour later, I got a long text from my mom. It was pure guilt-tripping from start to finish. She claimed she had only wanted to help, that she didn't mean to hurt me, and that this whole thing was breaking her heart. Then she threw in a classic line, "You'll understand when you're a parent." I didn't reply. I wasn't falling for it. Then my younger cousin, the one who originally posted the poll online, DM'd me out of nowhere. He apologized, saying it was meant to be a joke. He didn't think it would get this serious, and that he was sorry for stirring things up. Emma saw the message, and didn't even blink. She told me it didn't matter, whether it was a joke or not. They humiliated us publicly and never once thought about the damage it would cause. That was my breaking point. I called my dad and told him I was stepping away from the family for a while. I wasn't going no contact just yet, but I needed distance. I wasn't going to be the punching bag while they all played the victim. The moment I left the family group chat, chaos erupted. My aunt and sister started spamming me with texts. More guilt-tripping, more dramatic messages about tearing the family apart. My sister sent me paragraph after paragraph about how I was letting Emma ruin my family bonds. Then my mom made one last desperate attempt. She sent me a photo album of childhood memories, pictures of birthdays, family vacations, old letters I had written as a kid, along with a message, "Remember where you came from." I didn't reply. Later that night, my dad called privately. He admitted he saw my side, and that he understood why I was upset. But he also said he didn't want to get involved. He didn't want to take sides, even though he knew my mom and sister were out of line. That's when I knew. I wasn't going to fix this. They weren't going to change. Emma and I decided to block the worst offenders, my sister, my aunt, and the younger cousin who started the poll. I kept limited contact with my dad and younger brother. For the first time in months, the noise stopped, the drama paused, but I knew it wasn't over. 2 weeks of silence, no calls, no texts, Nothing from my mom, my sister, or anyone else in the family I had cut off. I started thinking maybe, just maybe, they had finally accepted my boundaries. Then the email came. My mother sent me a long letter. At first glance, it seemed promising. She wrote that she was truly sorry for how things had escalated, that she missed me and wanted to make things right. She even admitted that the poll had been inappropriate. For a moment I thought there was actual accountability, but then halfway through it fell apart. She started shifting the blame back onto Emma. According to her, the entire situation was just a big misunderstanding. She claimed that my wife had misinterpreted their concern, and that none of this would have happened if Emma had been more understanding of their intentions. By the end of the email it was clear. This wasn't an apology, it was a manipulation attempt. She wanted me to move past this and stop letting outsiders control my decisions. I showed Emma the email. She didn't even hesitate. That's not an apology, that's an excuse. I left it unanswered. A few hours later, my sister got involved. She posted screenshots of the email in the family group chat, praising my mom for being the bigger person and calling me out for ignoring her. She made it sound like mom had done everything she could to fix things, and that I was being unreasonable. Then came the public sob story. My mom posted one of those vague, dramatic Facebook statuses, the kind designed to get sympathy. Something about loving someone who refuses to forgive, and how heartbreaking it is when family chooses to walk away. And of course it worked. Mutual friends started reaching out. People who didn't know the full story were suddenly messaging me, saying things like, "Your mom is heartbroken, and you should at least talk to her." It was exhausting. Emma wasn't having any of it. She told me straight up, if I even considered letting my mom back in, there needed to be real boundaries. No excuses, no manipulations, no turning things back onto her. Then my mom took things a step further. She invited me to a family intervention. Apparently, my mom, my sister, and some of my aunts had decided that this whole situation needed to be fixed in person. It was an open invitation for me to come and talk, so we could move forward. Emma refused to go. Against my better judgment, I went alone. I don't know what I expected, but the second I walked into my parents' house, I knew I had made a mistake. It was an ambush. My mom, my sister, and 3 of my aunts were all there, sitting in the living room, waiting. The moment I sat down, my mom started in on her performance. She dramatically talked about how she had been losing sleep over this, how she never meant to hurt me, and how it was all just one big misunderstanding. She kept circling back to the same points, that she was just trying to help, that she only did what any loving mother would do, that she was heartbroken over this divide. It was all deflection. My sister jumped in next. She brought up how much the family had done for me over the years, how much they had supported me, and how it was cruel for me to just walk away over one mistake. That's when I finally cut through the nonsense. I made it clear, this was their last chance. I told them that if they couldn't respect my marriage, we were done for good. No more gaslighting, no more guilt tripping, no more trying to twist the blame onto Emma. If they wanted to stay in my life, they needed to accept my boundaries. Now, the room went silent. Then my mom burst into tears. She kept repeating that she never thought it would come to this, and that she just wanted her son back. My aunts were whispering to each other. My sister looked smug, like she thought this meant she had won. But I didn't back down. I stood up and walked out. I knew, as I left, that this might have been the final straw. Walking out of the so-called family intervention was supposed to be the end of it. I had drawn the line, made it clear that I wasn't going to let them manipulate or guilt trip me anymore. But instead of backing off, my family went nuclear. The next morning, I got pulled aside by my boss. Apparently, my mother had called my workplace. She had pretended there was an emergency just to check on me. HR had flagged the call because she had kept pushing for information, asking if I was okay and if anyone had noticed changes in my behavior. My boss was confused. I had never given them any reason to think something was wrong, and now my mother was trying to make it seem like I was unstable. That was the final straw for Emma. When I got home and told her what happened, she was done. She said if I didn't cut my mother off completely, she would. There was no more negotiating, no more waiting for my family to change. This was beyond meddling. It was destructive. And then, my sister decided to escalate things even further. She made another public Facebook post, this time outright calling me brainwashed. She claimed Emma was abusive, that she had isolated me from my loving family, and that I had cut off everyone who truly cared about me. It didn't stop there. Out of nowhere, Emma started receiving anonymous messages, texts from blocked numbers, accusing her of ruining my life, saying things like, "You don't belong in this family, and one day, he'll wake up and leave you." At first, we thought it was just my sister, but then my younger brother 26M called. He warned me that my mother had been telling relatives that Emma was controlling me and that she was trying to turn everyone against her. This wasn't just a family argument anymore, this was a full-blown smear campaign. For the first time, Emma's family got involved. Her parents had stayed out of it up until this point, but after seeing the harassment she was dealing with, they told me I needed to go no contact for my own mental health. And they were right. I had given my family chance after chance to make things right. I had listened to their excuses, their guilt tripping, They're fake apologies, but this calling my job, harassing Emma, lying about her to everyone who would listen. There was no fixing this. I went nuclear right back. I fully blocked my mother, my sister, and every extended family member who participated in this mess. I removed them from my contacts, blocked them on social media, and made it clear to my younger brother and dad that I wanted nothing to do with them anymore. And then, the public meltdown began. My mother immediately made another dramatic Facebook post, claiming she had lost her son and that she was being erased from his life. She painted herself as the victim, talking about how painful it was to be abandoned by her own child. I started hearing from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends, distant cousins, people who had no idea what was really going on. They were messaging me, telling me that my mother was devastated, asking me if I had really cut her out of my life completely. Then, I found out my relatives were pressuring my dad to take their side. They were telling him that if he didn't convince me to come back to the family, he was failing as a father, that it was his job to fix this. And what did my dad do? Nothing. He told me he didn't want to get involved. He just wanted things to calm down. I told him that they wouldn't, not unless he stood up to them, but he wouldn't. With my mother's sister and the rest of the toxic relatives out of our lives, something shifted in our home. For the first time in months, Emma finally felt safe. She wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder, worried about what my family would do next. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. No more family group chats filled with judgment. No more unsolicited opinions on my marriage. No more pressure to explain myself to people who had no respect for my choices. My mental health improved instantly. The stress that had been weighing on me, the constant battles, the endless cycle of apologies that weren't real, it was finally gone. But still, one question lingered in the back of my mind. Was this really the end, or would they find another way to pull me back in? The silence didn't last long. Within a week of going no contact, my family launched a full-blown public smear campaign. It started with Facebook posts. My mother, sister, and a few aunts began posting vague statuses about toxic spouses and losing family to manipulation. None of them mentioned names, but it was obvious they were talking about me and Emma. Then, my cousin sent me a screenshot from the family group chat. My mother had been ranting about Emma again, claiming she was turning me against my own blood and destroying the family from the inside out. My sister agreed, saying I had completely changed and that Emma was controlling my every move. But this time, they took things even further. Emma started receiving anonymous calls and messages, blocked numbers, fake accounts. The messages all said the same thing. Stop ruining a good family. One day he'll see the truth. You don't belong. It was straight up harassment, and then something unexpected happened. After weeks of staying neutral, my dad finally snapped. He called my mom out in the family group chat, telling her that if she kept pushing, she was going to lose me for good. He told her that this wasn't about concern, it was about control. That didn't go over well. Within hours, my dad became the new target. He was now being treated like a traitor. My mother, sister, and some of my aunts turned on him completely. They accused him of failing as a father, letting his son walk away, and choosing to defend Emma instead of his own blood. Then my sister took things to the next level. She made another Facebook post, this time going fully public. She wrote a long rant about narcissistic spouses and brothers who forget where they came from. It blew up. Hundreds of comments, some from family members, some from strangers, all debating the post. Some people agreed with her. Others called her bitter and toxic. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, my workplace got dragged into it again. HR called me in. Someone had filed another anonymous complaint. This time, the claim was that I was in a toxic home situation and that my wife was isolating me from my family. I had to sit down with HR and explain, again, that this was my family harassing me. Thankfully, my boss understood, but he warned me that this needed to stop. That was the breaking point for Emma's family. Up until now, Emma's parents had stayed out of it. They didn't want to add fuel to the fire. But when they heard about the workplace harassment, her father called me personally. He told me enough was enough. It was time to take legal action. I didn't want to. I had been trying to end this without involving the law, but it was clear they weren't going to stop. So I contacted a lawyer. I explained everything. The harassment, the false reports, the anonymous messages. My lawyer told me that while a restraining order might be premature, I could send a formal cease and desist letter warning them that any further harassment would result in legal consequences. Before I could even send the letter, my mother made one last attempt to fix things. She sent me a long email, pretending to be remorseful. She apologized, but then at the end she wrote, "We were just trying to protect you." That was it. That was all I needed to see. Emma gave me an ultimatum. She told me that if I didn't go through with the cease and desist, she would file a police report herself. So I followed through. My lawyer sent official legal notices to my mother's sister and a few other relatives, warning them that if they continued harassing me or my wife, we would pursue legal action. And just like that, the silence began. The Facebook rants stopped. The anonymous calls stopped. For the first time in months, there was peace. But something told me it wasn't over. A year later, life has never been better. With my family out of the picture, Emma and I are finally at peace. No more late-night texts. No more family group chat drama. No more Facebook rants. The silence that once felt unnerving now feels like freedom. Without their constant interference, my mental health has improved drastically. I no longer feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, waiting for the next round of guilt tripping. The stress that had been a part of my life for so long is just gone. And Emma, she's happier than ever. No more anxiety. No more worrying about what my family will do next. Our relationship is stronger, healthier, and finally free from outside influence. The only person from my side I still keep in touch with is my dad. He stayed neutral throughout the chaos, but his silence cost him his place in the family. My mother and sister now treat him like an outsider, blaming him for not forcing me to come back. He doesn't care. He's estranged from most of them now, and honestly, he seems happier for it. Then, out of nowhere, my younger brother calls me. He tells me that mom is sick. Apparently, she's been telling relatives that she's been struggling with her health because of the stress of losing me. Same story, different year. It's another attempt to pull me back in. But here's the kicker. She's still not taking responsibility. Instead of admitting any fault, she's pushing the idea that I was manipulated into abandoning her. The same tired narrative. And my sister, she's taken a new approach. Her Facebook is now filled with posts about family unity and healing from estrangement. She's trying to rebrand herself as someone who just wants peace, pretending that she was always the bigger person. She never mentions why the estrangement happened, never acknowledges the poll, the harassment, the fake HR complaints, or the online smear campaign. Just vague messages about how some people let outsiders destroy their family bonds. It's clear they've rewritten the entire story. Now, instead of admitting they pushed me away, they act like I abandoned them. And some relatives are starting to see through it. A few cousins have reached out privately. They admitted that they regret participating in the drama. They didn't think things would get so bad, and now they feel stupid for going along with it. I tell them the truth. I'm willing to talk, but only if they acknowledge what really happened. Some agree, others don't. And that's fine. I'm not forcing anyone to see reality. Then, my birthday rolls around. A card arrives in the mail. From my mother. Inside is a handwritten note. At first, it sounds like another attempt at reconciliation, but by the last paragraph, it's clear nothing has changed. She still blames Emma, still acts like I was taken from her, still refuses to accept that this was her fault. I don't respond. I toss it in the trash. Emma stays firm. If I ever let my mother back in, she needs to give a real apology, a real acknowledgement of what she did, not another guilt trip wrapped in fake remorse. And I know Emma is right. Meanwhile, my younger brother makes a big decision. He moves out of state. He tells me he just wants a fresh start. He doesn't want to be stuck in the family drama anymore. He saw what happened to me and wants no part of it. At this point, Emma's family has become my support system. They never judged me, never tried to control my marriage, and most importantly, they respected boundaries. That's something my own family never did. And then, the final nail in the coffin, my mother makes one last Facebook post. It's the most dramatic one yet. A long emotional post about the pain of being a mother whose child was stolen. And that's when I realize, she's never going to change. There's no closure, no reconciliation, no fixing this. And for the first time, I feel at peace with letting her go. 1 year of silence. And then, a single email changed everything. It came out of nowhere. No subject line, no warning, just a long emotional message from my sister. At first, I assumed it was another guilt trip, another attempt to fix things without any real accountability. But the moment I opened it, I realized, this wasn't what I expected at all. She started with an apology. A real one. No excuses. No passive-aggressive remarks. She admitted she had been wrong. And then, she dropped the bombshell. The poll wasn't a joke. My cousin hadn't come up with it on his own. My mother had orchestrated the entire thing. She had pushed for it to be created, encouraged the family discussion behind my back, and manipulated everyone into believing that my marriage needed to be evaluated. The poll wasn't some offhanded mistake. It was a calculated move. She had tried to manipulate me into leaving Emma, and it wasn't the first time. My sister confessed that our mother had done this before. She had interfered in every serious relationship I had ever been in. She hadn't just been protective over the years. She had actively planted doubts, spread lies, and convinced relatives to keep an eye on my past girlfriends. I had no idea, but apparently this wasn't new behavior. Then came the next revelation. My dad knew. My sister told me that our father had always been aware of how manipulative our mother was. He had stood by and done nothing because it was easier than confronting her. He had let it happen, over and over again. And then came the part that shocked me the most. My sister had finally cut contact with our mom. After spending months defending her, making public Facebook posts, and trying to make me look like the bad guy, she finally saw it. She finally realized how much our mother had been controlling her too. She apologized. not just for what happened with the poll, but for everything. For dragging Emma's name through the mud, for publicly humiliating me, for letting herself be used as a weapon against me. She told me she wasn't looking for forgiveness. She just wanted to own up to what she had done. And for the first time, I actually believed her. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it for a while. Part of me wanted to forgive her, but I couldn't forget how much damage she had caused. I showed the email to Emma. Emma didn't tell me what to do. She just said, forgiveness is your choice, but trust has to be earned. And that's what I told my sister. I responded to her email and said I wasn't ready to jump back into a sibling relationship, but I was open to slowly rebuilding things, on my terms. She accepted it. But then, my mother found out. Within hours, I got a furious text from her. She accused me of turning my sister against her. She went on about how I was destroying the family, how I had been brainwashed, and how I had finally succeeded in making everyone hate her. I didn't respond. I blocked her. And that was it. That was the final straw. With both my sister and I distancing ourselves, my mother was losing control. The family she had once held together with manipulation was falling apart. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't feel responsible for keeping the peace or fixing the broken relationships. I had chosen my happiness. I had chosen Emma, and I finally felt free.